Ken, welcome.
Hey Tom. Hey everyone. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Awesome. Thank you.
I
So
can.
your conversation with Arvin has triggered a question just around the whole psychological situation. So throughout Bhagwan's writings, he talks about sometimes about the maturity of a soul or maturity of an individual or maturity of a seeker, whether someone is immature or mature. And I was just and I was just wondering, because obviously the self doesn't mature. The self is the self. There's no maturing process. And yet, if it's not the self, it's the mind body that's maturing. Or am I just, so I'm just trying to figure out, and if there's one particular verse talks about if he hears a certain word, it's like cotton taking the flame and burning immediately because of the maturity. And and I'm wondering if that maturity happens at the psychological level or the ego level, or what is that maturity process?
Mm, that's a great question. That's a great question. Yeah. So we can talk about two different types of maturity. Okay. One is maturity on a body mind level as a human being. Okay. And then we can talk about a second type of maturity, which is spiritual maturity. And the two are not necessarily the same, or they don't necessarily go hand in hand. They're not the same. So maturity on a human level, on a societal level, on a body mind human being level. If we look at this is like biology and psychology. So biologically, we can see that the physical organism matures. Okay, when you're a baby, you have certain physical features as a baby. Okay, and then you grow up and you get bigger, basically, and you develop. And as the physical body develops, it gains new skills, fine motor skills, gross motor skills. It learns to speak, it learns to walk, it learns to jump, it learns to kick a ball, learns to catch a ball. And then the body goes through puberty and goes through those changes and eventually goes through adolescence into adulthood. And then eventually you have a mature physical body, right? And there's stages of physical development, skills in different areas, physical characteristics change. Okay, so that's maturation level of the body. The mind goes through a similar process because the mind and the body are one. So the mind will also develop, and that's why a baby's mind and the way the baby interacts with the world is different to a toddler, is different to someone who's pre-teen, different to an adolescent, and then different to a young adult. And then so the whole mind goes through a maturation process, you know. A baby and a very young child is just thinking about some basic needs, pleasure, pain, food, going to the toilet, things like this. And as it gets older, it develops new skills, it encounters new situations and becomes immature. And what Arvind and I were talking about was a form of emotional maturity, psychological maturity, that in an idealized sense should accompany physical maturation. So as we grow up and become adults, our physical bodies mature. And in an idealized society, which doesn't exist, but these are models we're using, the psychology also matures and we learn to communicate better. We learn how to regulate our emotions. We learn how to deal with our emotions. We learn how to deal with different types of situation. We learn how to deal with conflict. We also learn how to deal with things like compliments, you know? If someone says, "Oh, you look really," we know how to respond. Maybe when we're younger, you just go, "Oh my gosh, I feel really awkward." Someone said something nice. But as you mature, you learn how to deal with things that life throws at you. And this is a part of the maturation process. It's no different to the physical maturation process in that there's stages of development and there's specific skills and abilities that are acquired at different stages of life, right? And it's a process that never necessarily ends apart from that death of the body. The body keeps on going through changes. As we get older, as we age, the body keeps on maturing. And we learn more about our social environment, and we learn more about psychologically how to act and react and respond more skillfully. And then the body mind dies, and then that process is ended for that body mind. That is maturation of the human being on the body mind level. That is different. That is completely different to spiritual maturity. Okay. The reason I've emphasized all the biology and starting with the physical body is just to make really clear these are developmental stages. Some people get stuck at certain levels of development on the body mind level, you know. And there are physical disorders, for example, where biologically the body doesn't develop beyond certain things. So it never develops speech, for example. And that would be there are certain disorders in which speech doesn't develop properly, and doctors and healthcare professionals can help deal with that. Psychologically, many of us will get stuck at various levels of our childhood emotional development, and we'll carry that into adulthood. And much of our society is like that. Yeah, and this is not criticizing anyone, by the way. We're not judging people like saying, "No, that's really bad," or "You're childish," or "You're immature." We're not. We're just describing things. Just as if a child doesn't develop speech, we're not saying, "Oh, they're a bad child." It's just, no, no, some children don't develop speech, and we can help support them. In the same way, many human beings, we don't develop certain levels of emotional, psychological maturity. We're not judging them as being bad people. We're just saying that's what can happen. You get stuck in certain levels. Spiritual maturity is different. To put it simply, let me just quickly explain what is spiritual maturity in the way Bhagavan uses it. A spiritually mature seeker or aspirant is one that readily or is ready to take up self-inquiry. Spiritually mature seeker is one who wants to do self-inquiry genuinely, not because they've read it in a book, not because, or not just because they've read it in a book, not just because they think to themselves, "Oh, Bhagavan says do self-inquiry to get liberation. I believe Bhagavan, so I'll try and do self-inquiry." No, it's deeper than that. It's like an inner desire to know yourself. It's that inner desire for liberation is very strong. That inner desire for liberation has given rise to the inner desire for self-inquiry. Inner desire to know that unchanging principle I am in its true form. That is the spiritually mature aspirant. That is the spiritually mature seeker. It may not correlate with physical maturity on the body level or psychological emotional maturity on the mind level. Do you see that? Do you see that? You might get somebody who's physically immature, meaning they're a child, or emotionally, psychologically immature, meaning that emotionally they're a child. But they are spiritually mature, and vice versa. You may get a human being who's psychologically very mature, emotionally very mature, but they're not spiritually mature because they don't have any interest in self-inquiry. So they're a very well-rounded psychological human being. And of course, you can get a physically mature human being, an adult human who is not spiritually mature. So these are different domains of maturity. What makes a spiritual seeker mature? Well, we can't really give an all-encompassing answer because it's different for everyone. But one way of thinking about it is how readily are you able to turn away from objects towards the subject? Or how readily are you and how in love are you with however you conceive of the divine? Do you have a love for God? Or maybe you don't, or do you have a love for yourself? Meaning you love to pay attention to what you are. On the path of knowledge, usually it's when you become disillusioned with objects as a means of happiness. You start to see through all the various objects. all the things that once really enticed you, whatever it is for you, whether it's sex or drugs or rock and roll or any of the other things that Maya can offer you or appears to offer you, whatever your proclivity was to go towards, you start to see through that. Maybe you thought it'd be amazing to be famous. You started to see through that. Maybe you thought it'd be amazing to be rich, and you're starting to see through that. Or maybe you thought it'd be amazing to have really big muscles or a really thin waistline, or whatever it is, you know. Then you're starting to see through these things. Again, whatever it is, whatever the material or object-based source of happiness is for you. And then more than that, you start to get a taste for something else, the self within. This spiritual maturity. You see, so now hopefully you understand physical maturity, what that means. We all understand that anyway on some level. Psychological, emotional maturity, spiritual maturity. The three may go together. They may be linked, right? They may not be linked. You might get a child who's emotionally very mature. You may get an adult who's emotionally immature, and all the combinations, you know. Ashtavakra, sage Ashtavakra, who wrote the Ashtavakra Gita, or whose some of his conversations are recorded in Ashtavakra Gita. He apparently attained liberation in the womb, right? He heard the Vedas being chanted in the womb, and he attained liberation while he was still inside his mother's womb. And then he heard his father reciting the Vedas wrongly, so he called out from inside the womb, corrected his father, who then cursed him. And when he was born deformed. He had deformed limbs. His, specifically, he had 8 deformities. And that's why he's called Ashtavakra, which means 8 deformities or 8 bends. So that's the story of Ashtavakra. So physical maturity, spiritual maturity, psychological maturity. Maybe he wasn't very psychologically mature or emotionally mature. Because if Ashtavakra had greater emotional maturity, he would have known not to correct his father from within the womb. You see? He was physically mature. He was physically immature, sorry. Maybe he wasn't socially mature enough to realize the repercussions of his actions, but spiritually he was very mature. There you go.
Thanks, Tom. Just one small follow-up question. So, with regard to physical or psychological maturing process, it seems like we have some sort of control or steps we can take to affect that maturing process. Where the spiritual maturing process, it's not only like it happens to us.
No, it's
You
the
know, yeah,
same.
I can
It's the
make a
same.
decision to do self inquiry, but if I really don't feel like doing it,
It's the
it's
same. It's the same. Let's say you've got some emotional issues, yeah, and you want to improve them, yeah. Let's say you're an addict. Let's say you're addicted to something and you're trying to get over it. It can feel like it's controlling you, can't it? Let's say you're an addict to television. You're trying to give up television and you can't because it feels like, and this is what spiritual, but you have control as well. You have some control. It's not like you're totally helpless. And this is what the spiritual path is like. Some of it is just Bhagavan is doing this for us, and some of it we are doing. So it's the same.
Thanks very much, Tom. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate you and the question. Very much appreciate having you here, Ken. Really appreciate you being here. It's lovely. Rahul, welcome.
Thank you, Tom. It's great to
Welcome.
see you. I'm actually traveling to India, visiting my parents right now. So
Where are you?
I'm in Pune,
Oh, you're
which
in
is,
India.
yeah, I'm
Wonderful.
in India in Pune, yeah, with my parents. So it's very interesting, this topic. I wanted to build on what Ken was asking, specifically from the lens of I met my sister-in-law yesterday, who is actually studying astrology. And she and I started talking about like my astrological charts. And I know there's some people who don't believe in it at all. But there's also some sort of science behind, and the planetary and constellation movements and their impact on us, right? And one of the things she said to me is that the next few months, 18 months or so, because of certain transitions that are happening, are more conducive to you for your spiritual growth, is what she shared with me. And she had some reasoning behind it, etc. Right? And so I think, just to build on what Ken was asking towards the end, there are influencing factors, I believe, in our lives that help us in our spiritual maturity in some ways, because there are times when you're trying
Where
hard.
do they come from? I don't deny there are influencing factors in your life. Where do they come from? So maybe Jupiter is moving around in a certain way, and that influences you. Maybe this star or this constellation is moving, that influences you. Maybe you read a book. Um, maybe you find a book on the floor, and that influences you. Maybe you have a teacher at school or a mentor in the workplace that influences you. Maybe you watch a YouTube video that influences you. Maybe there's a new political party in power, and that influences you.
Yeah,
Maybe there's a spiritual movement, a spiritual renaissance that's occurring in your wherever you live, or in your neighborhood, or in your community, and that influences you. Yes, of course. We all have a story about, oh, I saw this video, I read this book, I met this person, I came across this teaching. Where does that come from, though? Where do all these things come from? Where do they come from? Who's orchestrating all these things? Why is it that you found the book? Why is it you heard the video? Why is it you met this person? Why is there a social change occurring where you live? Why are you born at the time when the planets or the stars are in this configuration? Why are the planets and stars in this configuration? Why did this man or woman come into your life just as when they did? You know, I did interrupt you.
no, I think you're raising a really important question. I mean, this where I was going with this is, I was wondering if these influences, um, I think that the cause and effect is questionable. What comes first is the
What comes
question.
first?
Right.
What comes first? Before all these things, what is there first?
That's not first. Yeah.
I am. I am is there right at the beginning. Chandogya Upanishad says, before all this comes into existence, you existed. You were there as being, pure being, devoid of any objective phenomena, devoid of any creation. And we projected all this. Then we take ourselves to be the body mind. This is the ignorance. This is the rajas and tamas. The rajas projects all this world. It's also called the projecting power. Vikshepa Shakti in Sanskrit. Rajas, it projects the world. And then the tamas, the veiling power, makes us forget what we are, and we think we're a body mind entity. And then all this stuff happens, and we think, oh, I'm a person, and all this stuff's happening around me. So Bhagavan teaches us that our own desire to attend to I am will supersede all other things, meaning that we can change karma. We can change the chain of cause and effect. We can change our destiny through will. There's a verse in Guru Vachakakova, there may be more than one, that describes how through our desire for liberation, we can change our destiny. It's not fatalistic, it's that we can actually attain liberation through our own efforts, through our own present efforts in our own life. It doesn't matter on the circumstances. Love overcomes all. Love prevails. Love for self, love for God, love for Bhagavan, love for Guru, love for truth.
And then what influences that, Tom? Our desire, our love for Guru. And there's something
Yes,
happening at the body mind level that seems to shift there, and I think this is the paradox because at the self level, you're right, there is no body mind and there is no progression, there is no there is no liberation. But then if you look at it through the lens of the body mind, that's when these questions arise, right?
of course.
And there are times when the body mind, uh, I don't know again what comes first. The desire
Well,
to do self-inquiry comes, and then there is this kind of that desire just gets overwhelmed by the events of Maya. And then there are times when the desire comes and the desire becomes stronger no matter what. And there's all these influencing factors that start becoming visible, but they're also irrelevant. And so I don't know what comes first and what drives this spiritual maturity.
mm.
This is, I
and,
guess,
and,
a
and, and
mystery.
does it matter?
Doesn't exactly. Maybe this is a mystery that we don't need to address. I hear you. Yeah.
It's not a resolvable question
Yes.
because
Yeah.
we're asking about Maya. Yeah, we're asking about something that fundamentally isn't, is non-existent. So there aren't, whilst we believe that we're a body mind in a world, we say why does one person seek liberation? Why does one person not seek liberation? Why have I come across Bhagavan's teachings? We can say grace. Grace. Bhagavan's grace. But then you say, why does Bhagavan give me grace and not someone else? There isn't really you and someone else. So we should go back to what Arvind was saying. Look, these are the cards you've been dealt. So we have heard of Bhagavan's teachings. This is the situation we find ourselves in, right? So let us accept that emotionally, factually. So yes, I have heard Bhagavan's teachings. I am interested in this. Instead of trying to find out what's caused it, follow it to its conclusion. You see? Why am I a seeker? Why am I seeking liberation? We can analyze that, sure. Will that help us in our path to liberation? You may feel it does. If you feel it does, then by all means pursue that line of inquiry. But maybe it won't help you at all. I don't think it will help you. All we have to know is that the more we attend to ourselves, or the more we fall in love with God, the quicker it will be easier it will be for us. Why? It's a mystery. It's not a solvable question because ultimately none of this is real. So how can we say which comes first or why it ultimately occurs? We cannot. It doesn't ultimately occur. Within Maya, we give these answers, grace, God's grace. I encourage you to try and accept that as an answer. It's God's grace. If you can't, by all means, pursue the inquiry and we can talk more. But if you're able to accept this as God's grace, that's much easier. The other problem with thinking that everything is things outside of you. Do you remember this? I don't know if we spoke about this idea of locus of control when you were at Satsang. There's an idea, it's a psychological concept of locus of control. Is the locus of control within me or is it outside of me? And what can happen is if we start thinking that our entire life is shaped by astrological events only, it can rob us of our own agency. Now, I'm sure that's not the intention of these astrological teachings at all, but that is one potential consequence where we think, oh, we're just a victim or a recipient of effects of something greater around us, rather than we have the power, because we are self, we are divine, we have the power to construct and create our own destiny, which we do. Because I am that, you are that. On the level of Maya, you are that creative power. You understand? We're not these tiny, puny, powerless things. We're not like a wine bottle cork bobbing up and down the waves of the ocean of samsara. No, we are the cork, we are the waves, we're the ocean, and we're the power, the force that animates all of these. And we are beyond. We're the stillness that's beyond all of these things. On the level of Maya. You understand, Rahul? Any questions? Anything else you want to say?
No, that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Never forget your own power. Never forget your own power. Not the power of the body mind. Bhagavan's power. Ramana's power. God's power. Never forget your own power. Don't give it away. You can't give it away, but you can imagine that you don't have it. That is what I mean by give it away. Reclaim your power. You have the power. You are that power. Thank you, Lance, for posting a wonderfully timely verse from Guru Vajrakova, which I'll read out so you don't have to look. Those of you who can see immediately look into the chat. I'll read it out for you. It's verse 518 from Guru Vajrakova. I have my copy of Guru Vajrakova. Do you want to read it, Lance? I'll happily read it. Auspicious is each day. Auspicious is each day. Benevolent in aspect, every planet. Lucky is each conjunction. Every hour is fit, fine, and fresh for the bright, unfading worship of the Lord. Auspicious is each day, benevolent in aspect every planet. Lucky is each conjugation. Every hour is fit, fine, and fresh for the bright, unfading worship of the Lord. The next verse, 519, is one of my favorite verses, which I'll read to you as well. Rare is the birth of faith in something. Rare is the birth of faith in something. If such faith is born, don't let the infant perish. Cherish it and guard it like the cow divine. Rare is the birth of faith in something. If such faith is born, don't let the infant perish. Cherish it and guard it like the cow divine. There's a footnote saying the cow divine, Kamadhenu, grants all wishes. So does faith in God and Guru. There's an idea that when we start paying attention to God, which is ourself, who is ourself, everything we want starts to happen. So God is called the wish fulfilling tree, or the wish fulfilling sacred cow, the cow divine. See, the divine cow. What does a cow do? Well, the cow gives milk. Yeah. What does the divine cow do? It gives us spiritual milk, spiritual nourishment. It grants all our wishes and desires. And ultimately, what do we desire most? Only liberation, only eternal happiness, joy, love, light, bliss. So thank you so much for everyone for being here. My love to you all. Ramana is shining within you, shining like a light, illuminating you from within. Here's the truth, the one, the all, the everything, yourself. Be what you are. Be with Bhagavan. Be yourself. Know your own power. Know yourself.